Hey there, this is Outpost 1018's review of Shadow of the Ninja Reborn. My name is Strider Baron, and I'll be guiding you through this arguably in-depth review of Tango Project's retro remake. Natsume Atari, formerly known simply as Natsume, has just recently released Shadow of the Ninja Reborn, which is a ground-up remake, and to some extent, a reimagining of Natsume's original NES and Famicom hit, Shadow of the Ninja. Shadow of the Ninja, as it's known in the US, was also called Blue Shadow in Europe, and the Dark Operative Kage in Japan, for those of you viewing this review outside of the US. Released in 1990, the game came to gain popularity as well as notoriety for being more difficult than Ninja Gaiden, which is an accomplishment given that to this day, Ninja Gaiden on the NES is considered a highly difficult game for most. Fast forward to 2024, as Natsume Atari has released Shadow of the Ninja Reborn. Similar to Natsume's earlier release in 2019 of its remake for the Taito SNES hit The Ninja Warriors, dubbed The Ninja Saviors, Return of the Warriors, as well as their remake for Pocky and Rocky, released in 2022 and dubbed Pocky and Rocky Reshrine. Their current year release of Shadow of the Ninja Reborn is also developed by Natsume Atari's in-house development team, Tango Project. What's most notable about these three Tango Project releases is that they were built from the ground up on modern engines to be played on modern platforms. Tango Project have yet to disappoint myself or most, if any, of their fans. While I may not have been the target audience for Pocky and Rocky due to my obsession with ninjas, I certainly am the target audience for their ninja-themed releases. Having shared some of the game's development history, let's jump right into the game's actual plotline and see how it differs from the NES versions. This is a rather short matter, since the plotline of Reborn is near identical to that of the original NES games. The main villain, Emperor Garuda, is a demon king like one that you'd find in any sci-fi or fantasy-based Japanese media. Garuda and his army of demonic cyborgs have taken over the world and are terrorizing the populace on a regular basis. Two shadows known as ninja appear, responding to the distress and misery of Garuda's many victims, doing their best to save humanity from the iron grip of the demonic madman, as well as avenging those who are oppressed by him. It's the same story, even going so far as mirroring the original NES game's intro, albeit with many additions and alterations. There's three differences of note. The music is an obvious upgrade, the background art, like the rest of the game, is also upgraded and is greatly detailed. The last difference being the presence of Garuda's enforcers, who will notably play the role of stage bosses you'll have to overcome before fighting the Mad Emperor Garuda himself. The gameplay is phenomenal, especially when compared to the original NES version. Like so many other things in this game, it's an upgrade to the original. It's effectively similar, but not identical to the original NES game, as wall running, mid-air hovering, and climbing the edges of walls have been added as navigational methods to the original hack-and-slash platforming. Two-player multiplayer is also an option from the very start, just as it was in the NES game, so you and a friend can jump into a game together from beginning to end. Or, if you feel you can take on the game and its many challenges by yourself, you can jump in solo with the game's single-player. There's a handful of modes which offer great replayability, such as the time attack mode. There's also an arcade mode, which lets you purchase weapons weapons, and other ninja gear, which range from small items like energy drinks that upgrade your base attack, and rice balls that give you more health, to laser guns that you'd find in a run-and-gun game like Contra, as well as classic items, such as the shurikens from the original game. I will bring this up again later in the review, but saving your progress is a bit of an oddity in this game. As for continues, the game seems to have an infinite amount of them, and if you repeatedly choose to continue, the game will assist you by giving you power and health pickups, though you'll lose all the gear you had before you died. Notable changes: some enemies have been functionally separated into two different enemies. For example, now instead of one type of robotic gunman attacking you, you'll have giant robotic troops shooting at you, as well as smaller gunmen who will shoot at you with their rifles. Additionally, enemy designs have been changed to fit the art style better. Thus, while the functionality of some of the enemies remain the same as in the NES game, their looks are upgraded to look more fitting to both the sci-fi setting of the game as well as the new general art style crafted by Tengo Project. Lastly, the biggest change in the gameplay that's noticeable right from the beginning is that the Kusarigama is no longer a separate item. In the original game, you have to find either the Kusarigama in order to use it and later on to power it up, or a katana to switch back to your default katana weapon. This is no longer the case, as you're now equipped with both weapons by default. Additionally, new attacks have been added as well. You can now launch your Kusarigama into 8 different directions based on whichever direction you're holding your directional buttons as you jump and attack. The katana has also received an attack reminiscent of Commander Keen's pogo stick from the game series Commander Keen. You will pull out your sword as you're about to land and bounce off of the enemy beneath you, damaging them, launching you back up into the air. However, you must press the sword button if you wish to make another blow to the enemy. Otherwise, you'll simply fall like you normally would and receive contact damage from falling onto the enemy. The last and most welcome difference is that weapon power-ups are shared between the katana and the Kusarigama. You no longer have to individually power them up like in the NES or Famicom game. The same rules apply though, as your damage level will drop the more you are damaged, just like in the NES or Famicom game. To reiterate, if you are damaged one too many times, your weapon downgrades incrementally until it's no longer powered up. You can alleviate this with the energy drink ninja gear item, or by finding a power-up essence while navigating through levels. The controls are relatively smooth, so I don't have much else to say about the controls other than recommending that you take a good bit of time learning them. Once you've gotten used to the controls, the game becomes significantly less difficult, as you'll be able to, for example, spin in the air to reach a hard-to-reach place, or dash to avoid a hazard a lot faster. I also highly recommend the use of a controller if you can get a hold of one, as it makes the game's experience not just more comfortable, in my opinion, but closer to the original experience on the NES. I must, however, stress this. Please read the game's included digital manual. It will save you a lot of time and will make gameplay a lot more clear. As mentioned, the Kusarigama now has an 8-directional attack system, and the katana has a pogo-like drop attack, which requires you to press the attack button each time you want to land onto an enemy with the sword. If you can master these two game mechanics, as well as the ninja dashing and mid-air hovering, you'll have mastered the core gameplay of Shadow of the Ninja Reborn. I would even argue that it'll help speed things up if you're aiming for a high score in time attack mode, or if you're a speedrunner. Shadow of the Ninja Reborn has a massive visual upgrade over its predecessor, Shadow of the Ninja, on the NES. The game's pixel art style is closer to that of a late Sega Genesis or Super Nintendo game, or an early PlayStation 1 game, than it is of a Famicom or NES game. However, the upgrade comparison doesn't end there. The artwork, all of which seems to be hand-drawn, are gorgeous. Level backgrounds feel like something out of an anime or a sci-fi, replacing the original game's simpler backgrounds, which had been made due to the set limitations of the NES at the time, in 1990. Additionally of note are graphical settings which you can use to make the game look more retro by adding fake CRT effects to your screen, which for some of you might better fit the game's pixel art aesthetics. When compared to the original game, there is a massive and drastic difference in style. Overall, the art direction that Tango Project went with is fantastic, and I can't find any gripes with it whatsoever. It's peak pixel art. As for the music in this reimagining, I'll have to say that I enjoyed the tunes very much. In fact, the composer for the original NES game, Iku Mizutani, worked alongside the Ninja Warriors composer Hiroyuki Iwatsuki on Shadow of the Ninja Reborn's soundtrack. Other works that Mizutani has worked on are Shatterhand, another hit by Natsume, King of Fighters 13, Tetris Plus, Russian Attack by Konami, the original Metal Gear by Konami, and that's just to name a handful of the games he's composed music for. Now back to Shadow of the Ninja Reborn. The music isn't an exact remake of the old NES soundtrack, and while I'm getting technical here because since I'm a musician myself, it doesn't just take the NES soundtrack and redo it in higher definition. Instead, we're treated to something a lot more substantial with a lot more creativity and effort put into it. The soundtrack is an all-original cover that takes direct influence, and I mean direct influence, from the old NES soundtrack, which was already cool, and makes it a million times cooler. Having said that, I'll also add that the music almost reminds me of the Ninja Turtles, and has a general 90s vibe to it, but that's another can of worms for another time. Most importantly, the entire soundtrack is done using real instruments, including the very radical use of an electric guitar. Before moving on to the next segment, I'd like to mention that the limited edition of the game comes with a copy of the soundtrack, in case you enjoy collecting OSTs. For those of you who are interested in the physical copy of the soundtrack that comes with the collector's edition, you can find it on Strictly Limited's website. Keep in mind, we are not sponsored or endorsed by Strictly Limited. There's not much bad that I can point out. However, what few bad things there are should be noted. The game has a save system that I can't exactly say I enjoy. Whenever you're killed in arcade mode, the game over screen pops up, and after you've decided whether or not you want to upload your score to the online scoreboard, you're given two choices. Your first choice is to continue. And as mentioned, the game has unlimited continues, as well as gradually added help in the form of ninja gear, such as energy drink or the rice ball. Your second choice is to return to the title menu. The latter is how you're able to save your progress in arcade mode. I've not been able to find any other way to save my progress, and I even went through 2 levels. As a test, I pressed pause to return to the title menu thinking I'd saved my game, only to find out that my save data was at the final boss of the first level where I had last died. The progress saving method is counterintuitive. However, it is the only flaw I've found in the 8+ hours of playing the game so far that I thought to mention. There's also a minor issue about the game's camera occasionally sticking to a new area once you've entered its designated zone, which can sometimes obscure your vision of your character. However, it's a minor issue at best, though I must add, some players who struggle with the navigational mechanisms of wall running, mid-air hovering, and such might find this a bit annoying, as they'll have to guess where the wall is if they want to catch their character up to the locked camera. Anyway, I must point out once more, this is a very rare occurrence, if at all. The average player is highly unlikely to come across this. So, to reiterate, the only flaws I found in this game are the progress saving mechanism and the extremely rare camera lock. Otherwise, it's a great game with no other issues. Having examined all those different aspects of the game, my final score for Shadow of the Ninja Reborn is 9 out of 10. I had to subtract 1 point due to the save system and the aforementioned camera lock issue. However, the rest of the game holds up with solid replayability, great multiplayer, time challenges, and a true dedication to the very DNA of the original Shadow of the Ninja on NES. I highly recommend this game and implore you to at least try it out, especially if you're a fan of ninja-themed games like myself, or if you enjoyed any of the original Shinobi or Ninja Gaiden games from the past. Overall, this remake of Shadow of the Ninja was a pleasant surprise to say the least, and it's a very satisfying experience that I can't recommend enough. This has been Strider Baron from Outpost 1018, signing out.